Hey guys, today we're working on a 1989 Ford F-150. I'm going to show you how to diagnose and replace a fuel pump on it. These trucks have three of them if it comes with two tanks. So let's get right in and figure this out. So the first thing you want to check, if you don't think you've got a working fuel pump, is the fuel pressure at the rail. There's a fitting here. You unscrew it and you can attach a fuel pressure regulator to it, or a fuel pressure gauge. You're looking for somewhere between like 35-ish to 50 psi of fuel pressure. I don't know, somewhere in there. So if you're not getting that, you've got a pretty good idea that it could be a fuel pump. There are a couple other things it could be, but that's a good starting place without having to crawl underneath the truck. Another thing that's kind of a dead giveaway is if you put the key in the ignition and you turn it forward, the lights are going to come on. It'll be in the on position. You should hear the fuel pump prime in these trucks. It'll prime for 2 to 3 seconds, and it's a pretty noticeable noise. On this one, I did hear that, but like I said, there's multiple fuel pumps on here, and at least two of them have to be working for the system to run properly. So there's one fuel pump in the front tank and one in the rear tank, and those are really just lift pumps to get the fuel out. And then there's another fuel pump on the frame rail about right there, and that one brings it to high pressure right before the fuel rail so that you can actually use the injectors. For me, the one on the frame rail was working, and that's what I could hear. So let's get on the truck and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so now we're under the truck and we're on the driver's side. There's a fuel filter right here, right after that last fuel pump. Goes up to the engine that way. And that's that inline fuel pump on the frame rail. So it's got this one plug and it's got these two wires, positive and negative, that run to it. They have screw-on terminals there and there. That's a really good place to test for voltage. So you can turn the key forward and attach a test light or a voltmeter to those two positions, and you should be able to see 12 volts or 12-ish volts coming to those terminals. Like I said, mine was working, so I knew I could hear it run, so I knew it was getting 12 volts here. So I unplugged mine, just this connector here, and then I turned the key forward, and then I didn't hear any fuel pumps running. So that's when we're going to go down that way and check the ones in the back. Now, if you did want to replace this one, it's got this bracket here with a couple of bolts in it and a couple of hose fittings here. I'll show you how to undo these fuel lines when I do the rear pump, but it's really pretty straightforward. You take this whole bracket off, put a new pump in there, put it back on, piece of cake. All right, so now we're where the front tank would be. I've already pulled it, but if you had to drop your front tank, there's two straps, one here and one that you can't see right now, and then a bolt. And that strap just goes up around that bolt. There's a nut there, and you pull the nut off on both of them, and that'll lower the tank. There's also a hose that runs from here up to your filler neck. You got to disconnect that. There's these two fuel lines that go into the fuel pump. Got to disconnect those. There's this electrical connector, and then there's this vent here that you've got to pull off. That's all of this is on the top of the tank, so it's a little tricky to get to, but I can kind of show you that on the tank in a second. So to test if you're getting voltage to this plug, there's an orange wire, a red wire with, I believe, actually this one looks like it's just red. Orange, red, and then blue and black. Blue and black are for the gauge. Orange is ground and red is 12 volts. So again, you would use a test light or a voltmeter and you would turn the key forward and you should see 12 volts between orange and red for 2 to 3 seconds. I checked that and I was getting it there. Now, the last tank is a connector up there. You can see I've got it unplugged. So it's one of these inline connectors And then there's another connector just like this on the fuel pump on the rear tank. But they use similar colors on these connectors. So there's a red with I believe, a yellow stripe that's going to be your positive, and then there's an orange that's going to be your negative. And again, you just find those two and you use a test light to see if it's getting 12 volts. I checked all of that and I knew I was getting 12 volts to every single pump. So at that point, I figured it was worth dropping the tank. As a last resort, before pulling the fuel tank, if you wanted to, you could figure out a way to run 12 volts directly to the red wire and ground the orange wire. And then you would know for sure whether or not your fuel pump worked. If you just ran 12 volts to it, you would hear it running. And I did go ahead and do that again. I ran that to the front one and the back one, and neither of them turned on. So that's why I went ahead and pulled the tanks. To remove the rear fuel tank, probably the first thing you're going to want to do is take the spare tire out and the spare tire hanger out. That is a couple of, well, a bolt here and a bolt over there. That'll help you get those out. And then there's two straps that run under the tank with a couple of nuts and bolts that hold those in. When I do this, I'm going to hit them with a torch for a little while, make sure I don't light anything on fire, but a torch and then some WD-40, that should break them free nicely. And then that'll allow the tank to come down. And again, there's going to be two fuel lines and an electrical plug and probably a vent, and then the filler tube. And here, that filler neck looks like that, and it'll go all the way back over to the top of the tank. And I'll probably take it off right here and pull that all the way down with the tank as it comes out. All right, so once you've got your tank pulled out, right now I've got it set up on in the bed. This is the hole where that vent was going to go, and then this is the filler neck. You can see right now I've got it connected here, and I slid it off from the other connection. I think it might be easier to figure out a way to get this hose clamp off before dropping the tank completely. I'm just not sure. It's really hard to see this one while it's actually installed. And then right here, you've got your fuel lines. This is the return and this is the out. So you need a fuel line disconnect tool to take that off. That tool looks something like this, or they sell little plastic versions of these too that are just one side. But basically, you fit the tool around the tube and then you shove it into the connector, and the tool actually spreads the clips out, which allows you to pull the fitting off. So once you get everything off of it, then there's a ring that goes around the whole fuel pump pickup, and you just use, there's four tabs, there may be more, maybe less. You use a screwdriver and a hammer, mine's already loosened, and you would just hit it and rotate this thing. If it's really rusty, you got to be really careful not to shear off any of these tabs. You might you might hit one at a time going around. This one's in good shape, and so I was able to just hit one tab. But basically, that'll unlock and allow you to pull this locking ring off, and then your fuel pump comes out. And you could see how bad a shape mine was in. It was all pretty rusted up. There's no more float on it, and the filter that sits on the bottom here is gone. It's in the tank somewhere. When you put the new one in, there's two tabs on the new fuel pump that fit in these little cutouts here, so you can only put it in one way. It's really helpful. So that was more of the diagnosis and overall summary of kind of how we're going to do this. I'm going to come out with a second video shortly that shows you more of the details of pulling the tanks and then getting them installed again and making sure that they all run properly, and see if we can get this thing fired up for the first time in a while. So thanks for watching. Hope that video helped. Let me know if there's any questions, and good luck fixing your truck.